Okay, the story I want to talk about is the story of someone sent me a question whether talking about Ethiopians, Somalians, Eritreans, and Djiboutis. This is called the Horn of Africa. Okay, let me be honest with you. Let me be 100% honest with you. Somalians, Ethiopians, Djiboutians, and Eritreans are Arab children born from African native female. You understand the identity of the Ethiopians and Somalians and Eritreans. They're actually children of the Arab men born from African native female. The ancestors of Ethiopians, Somalians, and Eritreans, their ancestors from their mother's side are African native female. Their ancestors from the father's side are Arab Middle Eastern males. Okay? Many people in Africa are not aware of the history of Arab presence. North Africa was not Arab. Okay? North Africa became Arabic more than 2,000 years ago. Arabs you see in the North Africa, in countries like Libya, Algeria, Egypt, Morocco, Tunisia, belong to the Middle East. Everybody in these countries, all the Arabs in North Africa, do not belong in Africa. Okay? All these people are under the banner of Middle Eastern or Arab League. They are not part of Africa. That's why Europeans consider Egypt, Algeria, all these North African countries under the Arab League. They are not necessarily African. Although they are born in African country, Europeans only talk about these countries as Arab League because they know that these people come from Arab countries. Okay? Being born in Africa does not necessarily make you a native. A lot of black people in Africa are not aware that they're not aware of the mixture and the coming of Arabs into Africa. Almost many people in Africa have never ever done a research of why Arabs in the North Africa, or why Arabs live in North Africa, and how do they become there. Okay, the coming of Arabs in North Africa into the North African countries and occupying the North African hemisphere was the biggest, pretty much Arabs pushed, and it was almost like a genocide against the natives. Many people have no idea, a lot of black people in Africa, that a lot of African countries, many people were exterminated. You understand? In North Africa. A lot of, if you go to Egypt today and look for native Egyptian, you'd see the native black Egyptians, they're numbered. You can even count them. Those are the natives of there. And everybody is Arabic. From Egypt, Tunisia, Morocco, Libya, Algeria, it's the same thing. All these people, they're not natives to Africa. They don't belong there. These are the people who were interbreeding with the North African and pushing the darker native African down south, the south of Africa. You understand? This is why if you take the DNA of any Arab person living in Libya, Egypt, Morocco, Algeria, and Tunisia, if we take their DNA, all of it is Middle Eastern and Europe. Mediterranean, Middle Eastern and Europe, all of them. Nobody have got native African DNA within these people. All the people I just named, Egyptians, or modern so-called Egyptians, Algeria, Tunisia, Libya, Morocco, and Libya, all these people born in these countries, none of them have got African DNA of the country they live. Their DNA is Middle Eastern and Europe. They don't belong in North Africa. They're pretty much invaders or intruders in Africa. This is the history many people see. Many black people have been taught the history of Europeans' colonization of Africa, but they've never taught the colonization of North Africa by Arabs. It's the biggest subject which many people have never learned about. That 98% of Africans have never learned about the colonization of Arabs. Arabs were in fact, in comparison between Arabs and Europeans, Arab colonization of Africa was 10 times much worse than that of Europe. In fact, the colonization of Africa with Arab led completely to at least an extermination of 50% of the Africa's population. Majority of black people in Africa are not aware that historically North Africa was was the most populated place. 90% of black people lived in North Africa, not in the south of Africa. In the south of Africa, the populations were very low. You understand? Majority of black people and the civilization of black people was mostly in North Africa. Not just in North Africa, in countries you call Sudan, Egypt, Sudan, Algeria, down through Ghana, Benin, Nigeria, all that region. This up to Ethiopia, all the entire North Africa from Sierra Leone to Ghana to Nigeria to Chad, Mali, Ethiopia, Somalia, that entire region, all that was the largest population of black people. 98%, almost 90% of black people lived in this region 10,000 years ago. It was the most populated place, overcrowded with animals and people and black people. That is the place where black people lived, majority. The south of Africa was mostly savanna and wildlife. You understand me? So this is the history of what a lot of black people have never been taught. Africa is not, Islam is not part of Africa. Islam has never been an African culture. Islam came to Africa with Arabs. It's not part of Africa. A black person, Islam has nothing to do with a black person. It's an Arab man's religion. It came through Africa through colonization of Africa by Arabs. This is the history many black people see. What is the connection between an Islamic person living in Afghanistan and a Somali? How did a Somalian person in Africa ended up with a culture and a religion of someone living in Pakistan? See, these are things many black people in these regions have no idea, because they've never questioned, how did you end up with a culture of someone belonging to a different continent than you? You understand? It's a taboo subject in many parts of Africa, because they've never learned. A lot of Africans have no idea that the Arab colonization of Africa is 300 times much worse than the colonization of Africa with the Europeans. The colonization of Africa by Arab countries led to the extermination of at least 50% of black people living in North Africa. Many people have no idea of the natives of Africa. Where did the natives of Africans who lived in the north went before Arabs took over north of Africa? See, these are subjects many black people don't know. It's the same thing when you are questioning the Aborigines of Australia, the natives of America, the native Indians in America. Same subject. But here, the topic I'm talking is the topic of Africa. You understand? And a lot of black people are not aware. Many black people who grow up in countries, they grew up in countries which were predominantly Arabanized, Islamicized by Arabs. A lot of African countries are not aware that it's almost like you grow up in a Christian country and you don't know where Christian come from. A lot of African countries are not aware of that. A lot of African countries are not aware. They think that they're Muslim because it's their culture. Africans were never Muslim. Islam is not even part of Africa. But if you ask a modern day Somalia, they swear and pay legion homage to Saudi Arabia. How the hell did you become a subject of Saudi Arabia? You understand? These are questions even a Somalian person today is very dumb, very ignorant. They don't even think, how do they become like that? Because they grew up in countries which have already been colonized and Islamicized by Arab men. And Arabs used a lot of violence, 1,000 times worse than the ones used by Europeans. In fact, Europeans were much better than Arabs. Arabs led to the extermination of at least 90% of blacks, natives in the north. Black people in the north of Africa were wiped out. Completely wiped out. A lot of black people have no idea that Egypt was black. Algeria was black. 4,000 years ago. You understand? 2 to 4,000 years ago, Algeria was black. Egypt was black. Tunisia was black. Morocco was black. Libya was black. All this region was predominantly black. And you ask yourself, what happened to the native black of this region? Where did they go? If you go to these countries, you could see the natives, black people in these countries, are numbered. In a million, you could see 1 or 2. And most of them live in the rural areas. You understand? They live almost not as subject, but as outcasts in their own native land. You understand? And these are subject a lot of black people don't even know, because a lot of black people think Arabs are like friendly to them. Arabs are not friendly to them. Arabs have never been friendly to black people. Arabs are far much worse enemies to many black people in Africa than any European countries are. Arabs are much worse. You understand? They're much worse in such a way that they've already exterminated and took over countries that in Africa, many African countries are not aware. They're not aware, like, where did the natives of these lands went to? Wiped out and pushed out of the line. Wiped out and pushed out of the country altogether. No longer even exist. If you take the DNA of Arabs in Egypt, Libya, Algeria, Morocco, Tunisia, and Algeria. Take the DNA of Arabs in North Africa in these countries. All of their DNA is Middle Eastern, Mediterranean, and some parts of Europe, and that's all. They have no DNA of North Africa. Zero. The North African DNA no longer exists because it's a native Africans who were bred out. No longer existed. They only exist in the DNA. Physically, you're not going to find anyone. Where did they? Imagine you go to Kenya and everybody's Arab. People start questioning, where did the native Maasai go? See, the impact is still on even in North Sudan. If you go to North Sudan, you see the north of Sudan is mixed Arabic. It's black people who were mixed with Arab by force. People like al-Bashir, that guy was called al-Bashir, is the son of a Middle Eastern. The great-great-grandfather, his great-great-grandfather was Middle Eastern. That's why all these people who are born from this type of breeding, the children look up to the Middle East. This is why you don't see a this is why majority of black people, 90% of Africans, from South Africa to Namibia to Zimbabwe, Botswana, Angola, Mozambique, Tanzania, all black people come from the south have no connection whatsoever with Ethiopians, have no connection with the Somalians, have no connection with Djiboutians, and have no connection with Eritrea. This is strange. You would never see black people in Africa wanting to do with Somalia or Ethiopia, because most black people, native Africans, don't consider people of these regions as Africa. They're classified in Africa, they're classified as foreign children. Children born in Africa from foreign intruders, foreign invaders, from native African females over 800 years ago. See, this history is not spoken in Africa. Take a DNA, go to Somalia today and take a DNA of a Somali. You would see Middle Eastern, Pakistan, Afghanistan. It's strange. A lot of black people in Africa, they're not aware of that, because many people concentrate on where you are born. They don't concentrate your bloodline or who gave birth to you, who fathered you. An Asian man coming to Africa today, or Chinese, Asian, Arab men coming to Africa, they father children with black local native. The children are left there. And when they are born, the children take the surnames and the names of the tribes of Africa, but the fathers are not from there. This was what was happening 800 years ago. Black native African men never left Africa to impregnate Arab male women over there. It never happened. It was always the African black female. These were the mothers of the invaders. The children born, this is why when the children born, they took the culture of foreign males. That's where you see Somalia. The culture is from the Middle East. North Sudan, the culture is Muslim from the Middle East. Nothing to do with Africa. You are not going to see North Africa is no, the entire North Africa, the culture is foreign. Something wrong with this picture. How can you be a native person in Africa and your culture and your religion, it doesn't belong to the land you are born into? You understand? Somalians, you go to Somalia today, the culture is Middle Eastern. The nation is in Africa. The culture has belonged to another continent. How can one person be born in one continent and have a culture which belongs to a completely alien, different continent? It's because of what was happening back in the past. Majority of black people in Africa are not aware of the Arab invasion and colonization of Africa. North African countries were once ruled by Arabs, including countries like Nigeria. It was under an Arab offspring. Nigeria, before European colonized Nigeria 400 years ago, Nigeria itself was under an Arab mixed hybrid child. But because these children are born from African native female, the fathers were not. And many people didn't concentrate on fathers in Africa. They concentrate on, if you are born in Africa, you are native. They never concentrated on the children of Arab fathers. People like al-Bashir of Sudan. See, that man is responsible for even killing a lot of South Sudanese. He was killing South Sudanese for not conforming to the Middle Eastern culture, for refusing to take the native. This is the danger of what was happening in the past. You understand? A lot of native African people were wiped out by children of Arabic culture, like Somalians. A lot of them, some of them in Ethiopia, some of them are in Djibouti, some of them in Somalia. You understand? A lot of people in Somalia, you could see the spirit of a Somalian person is completely different than that of an African person. If you take a Somali person and a black person from Namibia or South Africa or Botswana, okay, you could see the different spirit. The spirit of a Somalian is Arabic. That's why you see a lot of black people in Africa have never ever claimed Somalians. Nobody in Africa has claimed Somalians as part of Africa. They are always viewed as foreign. Somalians, Ethiopians, Djibouti, and Eritreans are classified as foreign children. In Africa today, they are classified as foreign children. They are not classified, even Kenya doesn't classify them as Africa. They are still viewed, even though they've got black skin color. Their forefathers were not black. And many African people are very wary of children born through this type of behavior, because these children wanted the cultures of their forefathers. You understand? Ethiopians, Eritreans, a lot of Ethiopians. In Ethiopia, there's a lot of tribes in Africa. In Ethiopia, there's a lot of African tribes in Ethiopia. But it has been ruined for 800 years. A lot of African tribes were interbreeding with the Arabs. The children were born in Ethiopia, and they took the culture of the mothers instead of Middle Eastern fathers. See, this is the history many African people are not aware. You understand what I'm saying? So the Somalians, if you look at Somalia, many black people in Africa, a lot of Africans, majority of Africans, do not, especially from the south, do not look at Somalians as part of Africa. They don't look at Somalians, Ethiopians, Djibouti, and Eritreans as part of Africa. They're classified as Middle Eastern. In another way, foreign children. Nobody claims these two people in Africa. Nobody, zero. In fact, 90%, if you look at it, it's still a lot of Africans are well aware. They would never claim a Somalian, Ethiopian, Djiboutian, and Eritrean. These people from this region will never ever be claimed in Africa. They are considered foreign children of native born in Africa. Foreign children. Why are they viewed as foreign? Because of what was happening in the past. See, there is this forbidden talk. Forbidden talk that what would you do to children born in Africa from foreign fathers who were not African men or who were not black males? Fathers from the Middle East have child with a black native female. They left. See, Arab men, when they ruled, many people are not aware that North African black people were taken over and ruled by Arabs in the north until slavery started. Arabs have been coming into Africa, pouring into North Africa, running away from their deserts in the Middle East. You understand? Because the Middle East was a lot of desert. You could not live there. But when they came to North Africa, Africa was more savanna. More wildlife in Africa. So Africa was the only place which was nutritiously, with wildlife, was abundant when they came in. So when Arabs came in the north, they stayed in Africa. They made deals with African kings. Sadly, African kings did not view Arabs as a threat until it was too late. You see what I'm saying? Until they realized when Arabs were pouring in their millions, and then the African kings were outnumbered and overtaken. North African people were ruled by Arabs up until 1300s, up until Europeans came in the 1400s, until the colonization of Africa. When Europeans came to Africa in the 1400s, Arabs were the ones in charge of North African countries like Nigeria, Chad, Mali, Burkina Faso, all the Northern African countries, including Sudan, Somalia, Eritrea, the entire North Belt. A lot of African countries were already occupied by Arabs, pushed the native down south. And this is the history many people are not aware of. because it has never been taught. Because Arab are very clever when they're dealing with the black people. Arab men, they're very clever. They use religion to sort of like to hide their attempt, their plans, especially in Africa. That's why a lot of African people today are not aware. You know what I'm saying? Many black people in Africa today are not aware that Middle Eastern Arab countries in the north, they don't belong to Arabs. Those were African countries. But what happened to the natives of those lands? They were all wiped out. See, many people are not aware of the history of what happened to natives of those regions. You can go to Libya today, Egypt. You could count the natives of that country. They're all black, but they're minority. They don't even reach 1%. They've all been wiped out. Bred, they're interbred, they're wiped out. They don't even exist. You can count them. One, over there you can see every 500,000 people, you can see maybe 4 or 5 of them. They're gone, finished. Same thing like the so-called Aborigines in South Africa. I mean, in Australia. See, this is the history many people don't know. When Europeans came to Africa in the 1400s, they noticed that the ones who were in charge of African countries were the Arabs, were the ones who were in charge of North African countries. In fact, colonization of Africa by Arabs was much worse than that of Europeans. Because the colonization of Africa by Arabs in the north led to the extinction of at least 50% of black people. Africa lost 50% of its population. Because North Africa, 90% of black people lived in the North Africa. 90% of Africa lived from Sierra Leone throughout the entire north of Africa to the Horn of Africa in Ethiopia. That was the population, the entire desert, every place that was predominantly black. The south of Africa was more wildlife. North Africa, that was where black people lived. Majority of black people lived in the north of Africa. This is why you see Nigeria today is the most populated countries in Africa. Nigeria, north, Ethiopia. You can see these two countries. This is the belt where more Africans lived in the north than south of Africa. You understand? Before the Arabs come in and pushed black people south, more Africans lived in the north. 90% of black people lived in the north. They didn't live in the south of Africa. The south of Africa had very few populations, very few tribes, very few hunter-gatherer and bushmen here and there. 700 years ago, majority of black people lived in the north. But for the past 2,000 years ago, they've been wiped out and pushed down by the Arabs. And many people today, even in Africa, are not aware that Arabs don't belong there. They're not aware. Arabs in Egypt, Arabs in Libya, Arabs in Tunisia, Arabs in Algeria, Arabs in Morocco, they don't belong there. Even if they take the DNA, they find their DNAs Mediterranean, Middle East, Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan, Pakistan. That's where they come from. That's where their ancestors come from. So what are they doing in Africa? They came through colonization of Africa long time ago. It's a history many Africans don't know. Look at this, their children of interbreeding with Africans: Somalia, Ethiopia, Eritrea, and Djibouti. And some of them in North Sudan. A lot of black people don't know because they say, well, if someone is born in Africa, he's an African. No. This is what has created a lot of problems in North Africa. It's because Arabs who were interbreeding with local African females left their children there. And these children took the culture of their forefathers, which were Arab men, and created havoc and destabilized a lot of African countries for years. This is why the north of Africa is ungovernable in many parts. It's because of these children who were born through this way, the interbreeding of African native black females and Arab men. The interbreeding of that produced the children which became poisonous and toxic to the native people and destroyed pretty much African civilization. It was destroyed through interbreeding with these people, with the Arabs. And a lot of Arabs shipped millions of black people from Africa through the Horn of Africa to countries like India. This is why India has got a lot of black people in India. And many people don't know the history of why India has got a lot of black people. There are a lot of black people in India. Again, the forefathers, the females were shipped there. Native African females who were taken in North Africa, they were being shipped there in millions to India. Then they interbred, they were sold as maids and things of that nature for over 800 years. And they were interbred with Arabs, men in there. They were sold as maids and things of that nature. They were not only sold, they were captured in Africa by Arabs, males, and shipped there to India, where they interbred again with the Arabs. And that's why you see a lot of Indians have got a black skin color, similar to Africa. You go to India today, but have you ever seen Indians being claimed in Africa? No, because many black people in Africa are well aware those children, the people who were shipped in the millions were the African native females, sold to work there as maids and sexual slaves for over 800 years ago, to 1,000 years ago. And then they interbred with Arabs and native of that region. And that's why you see a lot of Indians have got black skin color, yet they're not classified as black. Yet they've got black skin color, but they're not classified as black. Why they're not classified as black? Because they're not children of black African males. Although their ancestors were African females, African native females. They were not males. They were not black males. You understand? So this is the task to say, if a child is born from a black female, from a black African woman, and the father is not black African male, what are you going to classify these children born from African native females, but the fathers are foreign? Are these children native or not? Many black people in Africa, they say they're not. Children take the DNA of the father, the culture and the surname of the father. This is how you end up with the people you see, blacks in India, yet they're not African. Blacks in the Middle East, yet they're not African. Blacks in Somalia, yet they're not classified as African. Black in Ethiopia, yet they're not classified. Why are they not classified as African? Because their forefathers were foreign males. Their forefathers were not. You understand? So these people are classified as pretty much intruders in Africa. They're not even seen as they're not considered native in Africa. You don't see nobody in Africa. If you ever seen a black person in Africa, in any African, West African country, being friendly to a Somalian? And the spirit is why we are pushed away, because our ancestors are telling us through spiritual that these people, although they've got black skin color, they're very toxic to Africa. That's why there is a disconnect, because it's the blood of our ancestors which are preventing the connection. The blood of our ancestors are telling us, because our ancestors did not give birth, they were violently, you understand, our ancestors were violently brutalized. They were violently brutalized, violently impregnated by force with the Arab invaders. And the children born came through a cursed blood. It is these children which modern day people will call Somalians, some of them Somalians, Djibouti, Eritreans, and Ethiopians. These are the children. These are the great-grandchildren which are born through this way. But because they were interbreeding with the native African females, with the native African children, there was a lot of interbreeding. But still, the blood of these children, the pedigree, is still foreign to Africa. That's why you would never see a black person in South Africa, Namibia, or even in America connecting to a Somalian. You understand? Most Somalians, even in Africa, they're not classified as black people or African. They're seen completely strange. And if you ask yourself, even when I was visiting in some African countries, when I look at a Somalian, I was like, everything, the behaviors of a Somali is not African. The behavior of Somalians is Arabic. Their behavior, the way they behave, is nothing to do with Africa whatsoever. Somalians, Ethiopians, their behavior is foreign. Even Europeans, they know that. Europeans, if they see a Somalian, they don't treat Somalians as black, like me, like any other black person. No, they treat them completely separate. Why? They know exactly the bloodline. Like, these people belong to a Middle Eastern generic blood. They're treated like that. Somalians, if you look at it. Even in Europe, including in America. Even in countries like America or in Europe, in any European country, a person who is a Somalian or a Nigerian, or a person from Nigeria, or a person from Angola, and a person from Somalian, the person from Somalian is treated completely different. They don't mind an Angolan. They don't mind a person from South Africa. They don't mind a black person from South Africa, Namibia, or Angola. They don't mind that. A Somalian, they treat the Somalian with complete caution. You understand? And it's the same thing even in Africa. Among black people themselves, you look at a Somalian, you'll be like, no. Something. These people, they carry the blood which is not African. Very toxic bloodline. Which pretty much is toxic and poisonous to the lives of Africa. It doesn't matter even if you look the same. You understand? It's a, even if you, I'm not a religious person, even if you look at the Bible, it's written in the Bible. There is a certain verses which God talks about punishing the children as a result of their ancestors, their forefathers. Exactly. This is why they talk of the blood. You understand? The seed comes from the father. If the forefathers were brutal invaders, very, very toxic invaders, then they forced themselves to breed with the native female by force. It was trauma on an industrial scale which faced the African native female over 800, 900 years ago. You understand? They were facing trauma of being people brutally impregnated by force with the invaders. And the children born were, and these local African native females were left to give birth to these children of invaders. And these children mingled with the native African populations and interbred. And the bloodline of these children remained to today in people you see today as Somalian, Ethiopian, Djibouti, and Eritreans. You can look at them even today, you can tell these people are not African. You don't need rocket science. Spiritually, you can see a Somalian is not connected to you. You don't need to be connected. You can see you never connect to a Somalian person. Even Europeans know that already. Even Europeans can see a Somalian is not black. They don't look at a Somalian as black. They know he's black, but he's not black. Same thing if you look at Indians. Indians, there are a lot of people in India are black, but are not black. Black, but not black. It's almost a black and a question mark. You understand? Black and a question mark. You go to India today, millions of black people, over 250 million people with black skin in Africa. Are they black? No. There are over 250 million people with black skin in India. I'm talking about India. In India. But are they black? No. Are they classified as Africans? No. Yet they've got black skin color in India. Why? Well, the forefathers of these people were not black. That's why you see India is black but not classified as black. You understand? It's because of the bloodline of the fathers, not the mother. No. There are many people in India who look is just dark like me, but you never classify them as black. No. Why? It's because they understand the bloodline was never from African fathers. It's the same thing you see today, a Somalian person. The moment you look at a Somalian person, they look black, but they're not. They're not. They can be born in Africa, but they will still, even if you look at a Somalian person, you won't connect to a Somalian person. Why? They're the children of the invading Arab males. 600, 700, 800 years ago in Africa. Arabs came from north. Arabs used to rule North African countries. North African, native African countries. Until Europeans came in 600, 500 years ago. Until the colonization of Africa by Europeans, that's when the Arabs stopped. Because there was another colonizer now, European. They're the ones who stopped, actually, Arab colonization of Africa. Nigeria was under Arab. Arab males ruled Nigeria. Ruled a lot of Africans from Sierra Leone to North Ghana, down to Nigeria, Cameroon, down all African countries in the north were ruled by Arab countries, by the Arabs in the north, until Europeans came in and stopped them. You understand? So a lot of black people, like I say, a lot of black people do not know about this history. No idea. You understand? They have no idea. And think of it, how many children they fathered. The Arab males who were in charge of African countries before Europeans came to Africa, before colonization of Africa by Europeans. How many children fathered by Arab males in Africa? There are over 180 million children. You understand? And these children interbred. That's why today you can take a Somalian today. Take a Somalian and an Ethiopian, or a person from Djibouti, or an Eritrean. Take their DNA, you are going to see Afghanistan, Pakistan, Syria, Iran, nothing to do with Africa. But the person is black. Take the DNA of a person and you realize, take the DNA of an Eritrean or an Ethiopian, take their DNA, you are going to find the DNA they have from their mother's side is going to be African, East African. Father's side is going to be Arab. Every time you take a DNA of a Ethiopian, Somalian, North Sudan, Ethiopian, Somalian, Eritrean, and Djibouti, take the DNA of these people. From their father's side is Middle East. From the mother's side is African. And that tells you these are children of the Middle East. You take the DNA from the father's side, you will be shocked. Many people have no idea. It's a history which has been taboo in Africa. Because many people in Africa that say, well, if you are born in Africa, you're African. No. You can be born in Africa from different foreign fathers today. But back in the day, North Africa, this is why North Africans, or even today, you've got DNA of Arabs. How the hell you could be one person? Can you imagine me like this, having 50% Japanese DNA and then 50% African DNA? The moment you study, you realize, where did the Japan come from? And the more you study, you realize, there was a Japanese colonial invading in the past history, 200 years ago. And then you realize, he married a local female, or he interbred with a local female. Back in the days, there was no marriage, sadly. It was a conquest. You understand? Back in the days, there was no marriage, especially to the Africans. It was all through violent, you know the history. Most people, you know the history. But the issue I was answering here was the history of Somalians, Ethiopians, Eritreans, and Djiboutians. They carry the African native genes through their mother. You understand? And the culture these people have through their mother is through their mothers. over the history. You understand? But because of the interbreeding, which was mostly by force when the Arabs used to rule North African people, North African native black people, it was horrible. For over nearly 800 years, it was horrible until Europeans came and stopped it. And then they started the, colonization of Africa. That's when the Arabs stopped. That's when the Arab... Many people are not aware that the colonization of Africa by the Arab countries was much worse. Many African countries, many natives lost Libya to the Arabs, Egypt to the Arabs, Algeria to the Arabs, Tunisia to the Arabs, Morocco to the Arabs. Arabs, they are not a native in that place. They belong to the Middle East. How did they came there? See, many people are not aware. How did these people end there? Even if you take their DNA today, it doesn't belong there. There was a guy who was called an Egyptologist, just the so-called Egyptologist, an Arab guy, who took his DNA. He thought he was native in Africa. He thought he was native in Egypt. Guess what? His DNA was Turkey, Iran, Turkey, Iran, Iraq, and Pakistan. He had no DNA of Africa whatsoever. He was shocked, almost cried. His eyes was red with shock. So he started looking, where is my African native DNA? Where is my African DNA? Zero. Yet this is a person who thought he was native. A lot of people cried when they took the DNA. They cried their eyes out with the sheer shock. They had no DNA of the countries they were living whatsoever. It's because of the colonization and what was happening in the past was all forgotten. Many people are not aware. Arabs in North Africa, they are not descended. They don't belong there. A lot of Arabs in Africa, they don't belong there. They're invaders there in North Africa. That's why you can go to Morocco, Tunisia, Algeria, Libya, Egypt. Take the DNA of any Arab person who lives in that country. Take the DNA, you will be shocked it doesn't belong there. Zero. No DNA of the country they live in. Zero. All of them. And they were shocked. I mean, the guy was shocked. I was looking at the guy like this. He was shocked, almost crying his eyes out. Phoning his mother. Mom, how come I have no DNA of Egypt? This Arab guy. I have no DNA of Egypt. And they phoned his own grandmother. And his grandmother said, no. His mother left Turkey in 1850. He was shocked. Because he had no idea. A lot of people are not aware, zero, that they are not natives in Africa. There are a lot of people that are not aware. Because these are things that are not discussed. Many people just say, well, you are where you are born into. No. Go and take your DNA, you'll be shocked. And another woman from Ethiopia took a DNA and then she found herself, she was 52% Italian. And she started phoning the mother. Why is it my DNA is 52% Italian? And then the mother revealed, once upon a time, Ethiopia and Italy went to war years ago. And Italian soldiers came in and they met and they interbred with the local. And so she realized, she's not native. She belongs to Italy. But she was black. She realized the father, the great-great-great-grandfather was Italian. A lot of people, like I say, a lot of people are not aware of the history of North Africa. Are not aware of that. You understand? Many people are not aware. So the history I was talking about here, I think I've answered enough. That Eritreans, Ethiopians, Somalians, and Djibouti, these people are mixed hybrids and pedigrees of Middle Eastern males who were interbreeding with native African females. These African females for over 800 years ago, they're the ones with the native culture. They were the ones who have kept the African ethnic tribal cultures. But the children born, sadly, they were from foreign fathers. Most of them were Arabs. Africans never went to the Middle East and brought an Arab woman into Africa. That didn't exist. That didn't happen. In fact, our females were the ones who were forced to breed and taken by force to foreign nations. So I think I've answered what I done. I think I've answered a few questions. Anybody who need a further discussion, I'm free. You can subscribe. We'll do what we can to push this knowledge further. With that in mind, everybody, subscribe if you've got anything you need. You can put a topic, whatever you want to talk about. We can discuss it further. Anyway, with that said, goodbye. See you later. I'm a bit tired. Thanks. Goodbye.